It's Saturday, November 18th, 2017, and this is Seahawks Chats with Kenneth Arthur, And you know what that means, or you don't, because I'm just making it up right now on the spot. It means that it's a solo show. Myself, Kenneth Arthur, will be talking to Kenneth Arthur of fieldgoals.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Kenneth Arthur S or at fieldgoals about the Seahawks-Falcons Monday night showdown on Monday night. That'll be happening in Seattle, the Puget Sound, up there in the Northwest. And, you know, if you want to go down to Pike Block Market, you can maybe catch a fish. So that's what you want to make sure to check out this week, Sunday, Monday. Go down to Pike Block Market and try and catch a fish. Featured on ESPN B-roll this week. Featured in the A-roll will be the Seahawks and Falcons. And we're going to talk about, me and Kenneth Arthur are going to talk about the Falcons. We're also going to talk about the Seahawks, starting with the Seahawks. If you're listening to this now, you're a Seahawks fan, and that's for sure. It would be crazy if you were just a fan of me or about football or even the Falcons. I mean, how did you get here? I mean, I'm just a guy speaking on something. So let's talk about the injuries. Strong safety extraordinaire is expected to miss the rest of the season now with a neck injury. Chancellor, of course, you know, he signs a contract extension and then he has a season and then the season is cut short. So that is extremely unfortunate. The contract having to do with it only in the sense of it happened. I mean, it's news. And then this is other news. And then the news conflicts with one another because one of them is good news and one of them is bad news. Chancellor, 29 years old. You know, he had 33 tackles this season solo, 15 assists, a safety, one forced fumble, 2 batted passes. Chancellor, you know, hasn't, you know, great. And it's tough to take him out of it and to see where the Seahawks will be. I don't think that it'll be as much of a drop-off as we saw from Earl Thomas to Stephen Terrell last season when they lost Earl Thomas for the rest of the season. But certainly, you know, it is something to consider. Now we're going to see Bradley McDougald. Another reason to have some hope is that Bradley McDougald played well at free safety the last 2 games in place of Thomas. He'll be stepping into the strong safety role for the remainder of the season, barring more bad news. And that can range from, you know, McDougald getting hurt, McDougald not playing well, McDougald leaving football to pursue a career as a player, McDougald getting his own Twitter account and, you know, but then really blowing up on Twitter and deciding that he's going to become a Twitter star and parlaying that into maybe his own YouTube channel that's sponsored by Crackle. And there's lots of things that are possible for Bradley McDougald right now. But the one thing that we want to focus on here in the sense of the football and the Seahawks is him playing well. And that'll come for the first time in terms of starting strong safety this Monday night against the Atlanta Falcons. And that'll be something. And isn't that exciting? You know, Chancellor, a 4-time Pro Bowler. His last Pro Bowl came in 2015. Last year, you know, he probably was playing up to a par that would be expected of Cam Chancellor, but missed 4 games. And that's something to consider as well. The fact that, you know, though they've played without Cam Chancellor more frequently than we would have liked in the last few years. You know, 2014, he misses 2 games, but then also, you know, was really banged up in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. 2015, he sits out he misses 5 games. And then last year sits out for 2 games and then misses 2 games with injury. And this year he's going to miss 7 regular season games. And of course, all of the playoffs, if they even happen. But hey, we stay positive around here. They could happen, but the big problem being that not only is Cam Chancellor out, of course, this is going to be the first game without Richard Sherman since 2010. Sherman, the all-pro cornerback, Hall of Fame cornerback, best cornerback in the game over the last 6 years. He's torn his Achilles. He's out for the rest of the year, and that means that it's going to be sort of just a moving up of sorts in Shaquille Griffin. Needs to play like a number 1, or at least that's the role that he'll probably be assuming. Jeremy Lane needs to play much better than he has been playing over the last couple of years. Justin Coleman, you know, is in that slot position, and he's going to have to, you know, just continue to do that. And then Byron Maxwell added to the mix this year, this week. Okay, which technically, and as far as I'm concerned, weeks are part of a year. So he's a part of this week, which is a part of this year. So he's just been added. And Byron Maxwell, for whatever it's worth, it didn't work out in Philadelphia, didn't work out in Miami. I think there were still times, especially last year, that Byron Maxwell did look like the guy that was with the Seattle Seahawks, and now he's back with the Seattle Seahawks. And this is something that I feel like aware of or privy to even in my early days of being a football fan, which, that was the mid to late 90s. But it always just seemed like what I could recognize as a guy who didn't know anything. And now I'm a guy who knows 2 to 5 things. It's that these players, they would be successful for a team. And I'm just, as the most basic level, be successful for a team, sign a big contract to another team, not be successful for that team, and then go right back to the team after only 1 year sometimes, go right back to the team where he was successful and be successful again. A recent example of this is Michael Johnson of the Cincinnati Bengals. And he's not, and he's sort of like, I feel, on that Byron Maxwell talent level. He's not spectacular, but he's much better with the Bengals than he was in his 1 year with the Bucks. So, Maxwell was very successful with the Seattle Seahawks. His advanced stats, and I'm not talking about grades, I'm talking about advanced stats, which even if it's not even that advanced, but like passer rating against, completion percentage against, when he was with the Seattle Seahawks, and he was playing, to be fair, opposite of Richard Sherman and with Cam Chancellor as part of his support, system back there, which he's not going to have this time, but he's very successful. So have high hopes for Byron Maxwell, in the sense of I don't have high hopes for Byron Maxwell. I take that back. I have hopes for him, and how high they are. It's like if it's from the ground, like if it's a pool and it's like the pool goes 8.5 feet deep. My hopes would be right around the 4 foot mark. And, so I'm waiting, WADING at that 4 foot level for Byron Maxwell. Just in the sense, can he just provide adequate coverage? That's about as much as we can be asking for. That we don't have as fans can't look at the Seahawks because they're the team and say, okay, so they need just guys, they had the best cornerback. So that shuts down half of the field. That's not there anymore. They're not going to have that shutdown aspect of it, which means, I think everybody obviously needs to play a little bit better, but also, it's going to come down to offensively, they need to be more consistent. They need to be better in the red zone. They need to score a lot more touchdowns when they're in the red zone at a higher, rate. They need to force more turnovers. They're going to give up more plays and they're going to give up more first downs. So that means they got to force more turnovers. And I don't know how you can will yourself to do that necessarily, but that's just something that they're going to have to hope happens, whether it's from adding more pressure to the quarterback. And so that's going to come down to Chris Richard and the opportunities that they provide for their front seven. They're just going to have to force more pressure on the quarterback, force more turnovers, and hope for some fumble luck. So that's kind of where I'm at with the ability to recover from the loss of Richard Sherman. It's not just going to happen, I think, with the addition of a cornerback, or it's just not going to happen through talent at the cornerback position. So it's going to have to come through better ability to create pressure on the quarterback and create pressure that matters, because I think there's pressure that doesn't matter, and you got to be able to get sacks. You got to be able to hit him while he's throwing. You got to be able to, force him to make a bad throw, to throw off the wrong foot, to throw off the wrong direction, all that kind of stuff, because it's not going to come down to coverage anymore from that number one cornerback. The good news is that Earl Thomas, is back, but that's a lot of pressure now for everyone else, and it can't just come down to Earl Thomas. The injury report this week did not practice on Friday included Luke Jokel, who the hope was he would be practicing on Friday, and he didn't. So, that's a concern in the sense that you wish he was, if he had practiced, that would have been maybe something else. But maybe, if they just want to give him another day of rest, maybe Luke Jokel returns at left guard. Dwayne Brown did not practice. He's a game-time decision, so that's your left guard and left tackle starting-wise. And if they can't go, then you're going with Matt Tobin and Ethan Posick. And if they can go, you're going with Dwayne Brown and Luke Jokel. And that's freaking insanely different. So that could be a situation. That is a situation to monitor, and that could be the difference in the game. Jaron Reed, who has a hamstring injury that has ranged from worrisome to Reed thinks he's going to play. So who knows exactly where that's going to end up winding down. But my hope, of course, being, and my hopes for this would be in the 6.5 feet of pool water. And that means for me, I am a 6.5 foot tall man. So that's right up above, that's up to the top of my head. I can't breathe. That's how hopeful I am for Jaron Reed to be able to play, because he really is a great run stuffer, and he's improved as a pass rusher interiorly, which is definitely a word. And so that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to is Jaron Reed, and if he can play on Monday Night Football. And then Michael Wilhoit, the linebacker, also did not practice. But overall, when you can look at the players that, should be able to go, you're talking about a Russell Wilson who's got a jaw situation, a Frank Clark who's got a thigh situation, a Jimmy Graham who's got a knee situation, an Eddie Lacy who's got a groin situation, an Earl Thomas who's got a hamstring situation, and a Shaquille Griffin who has a shoulder situation, and a Marcus Smith who has a concussion situation, and a Michael Bennett who's got a heel situation. Not good situations. These aren't the situations that we want to be talking about. We want to be talking about the situation room, which is what I call CenturyLink. Okay, so let's get in the situation room and score some points on the Atlanta Falcons, because that first game without, Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman, ooh, daddy-o, not happy-o, and possibly without Jaron Reed. So gonna have to score some more points. I went to Twitter to ask for some questions, so let's mix it up a little bit and get a question in here. And I'm not even I'm cold reading these questions. So if they're bad questions, I've stepped into it by not preparing well enough. I just asked these questions. Well, I had to rejigger the plans to make a solo show because we had some technical difficulties with guests and stuff. So at Seahawks Fly High, and it's not spelled Seahawks like the traditional way, I'll tell you that much. Some could say that it says at Chalks Fly High. If we beat the Falcons, and I don't think he's a member of the team, no offense, I don't think he's on the Seahawks, so I'm going to switch this and say if they beat the Falcons, are Russell Wilson, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner with a supporting cast enough to take us, and I think he means them, all the way? Will a win prove that we, and I think he means they, or the Seahawks, can still be good even without Cam and Sherm? Well, I don't think. Okay, so first of all, are Russell Wilson, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner with a supporting cast? So I'm assuming this means that, obviously these are his top three players, and without one of these three guys, because these are the main players. If this was the movie like L.A. Confidential, in this, I don't know if I want to use L.A. Confidential as the, it's a controversial time for Kevin Spacey. So I'm not sure if I want to use L.A. Confidential as my basis for a star-studded film at this time. So let's go with, nope, he's in that one too. Okay, so a star-studded film. Oh, man. You guys remember the movie Sphere? Well, that one I felt like it was pretty star-studded. It's got three people right on the front cover, their faces, and it was the height of 1998, Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, and Samuel L. Jackson. So for Lucas, he's saying Russell Wilson, Earl Thomas, and Bobby Wagner are Dustin Hoffman, Russell Dustin, Earl Thomas is Samuel L. Jackson, and Bobby Wagner is Sharon Stone, playing Dr. Elizabeth Beth Halperin. Okay, so that means that the supporting cast would be guys like Liv Schreiber, who plays Dr. Ted Fielding, or Queen Latifah, who plays Alice Teeny Fletcher, or Huey Lewis, who apparently is the helicopter pilot in this movie, and Peter Coyote, who's Captain Harold C. Barnes. Then you've got some other people as well. And so what we're talking about in this situation is the supporting cast. So the supporting cast for the Seattle Seahawks would be guys like a Jimmy Graham, or a Doug Baldwin. And I would put Doug Baldwin, if I'm getting a 4th star in my movie, I'm calling Doug Baldwin a star. I mean, for me, he's close to that all-pro level, and who's an all-pro celebrity? A guy like maybe a Michael Fassbender. I feel like Michael Fassbender is on the downward slope right now, and that's unfortunate for the Fast Man, who was flying so high with those X-Men movies, and he still got those. But I don't know if the Alien movies are really, the major hits that they wanted them to be. And the Snowman was eviscerated at the maybe at the box office, but definitely by critics. So maybe that could be, sort of a star like an Eddie Lacy is a Michael Fassbender type situation. And then you've got Doug Baldwin, who's maybe more of an Emma Stone, who is coming in hot and, is the it person and wants to, and, he's going to, get the job done. So then you've got him, or you have Paul Richardson. Okay. And you've got Justin Britt and KJ Wright. Okay. So there's still good supporting cast. This isn't a crappy supporting cast held up by its 3 megastars. This is the star-studded cast. This is like, oh wow, we've got a cameo by when you're trying to focus on, you can only get one person in your head, but you don't know what their name is. I mean, you know what their name is, but you can't think about it. John Turturro. So it's like, this is like a Coen's brother movies. There's so many stars. Frank Clark. Is that Frank Clark over there? Is that Sheldon Richardson? So look, this isn't the Seahawks 3 stars and a bunch of other guys. By the way, this is minute 6 now, I think, of answering a single question. Then I don't think I've even started to answer the question. This is still a very well-rounded NFL team, and you can look around at other football teams. Very few aren't suffering an injury to a superstar player as among the contenders. And that being with that, which are the teams that are have better depth? And I think seeing the way that the Seahawks have added depth through Dwight Freeney, who has 3 sacks in 3 games, or Deion Jordan, who now has a sack and looked very good with 2 pressures in his first game back in 3 years. There's positivity throughout that supporting cast, and we want to make sure that they're given a lot more respect than the Professor and Mary Ann were given during the credits of Gilligan's Islands. Will a win prove that they can still be good even without Cam and Sherm? I don't know that anything will be proven with any one game, because things happen every week with one game. I mean, if they lose, it's just how did they lose? How did they win? What were the results? How bad did the pass defense look? There are so many other factors that the results of the game are almost meaningless. It's the way that the game transpired that should give you either hope or make you start thinking about next year, because we know that those 2 players aren't coming back. But even still, if you're going up against Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, Julio Jones is the best, very likely the best, receiver in the NFL, most talented receiver in the NFL. I don't care if he has 1 touchdown or 20 touchdowns. An incredible player who will go to the Hall of Fame. So it's like, if you've got Julio Jones versus Shaquille Griffin and he has 200 yards, and and you're talking about how the Seahawks gave up 400 passing yards, this would not be one of the weeks I know Matt Ryan's not having another MVP type season, but this would not be a week necessarily to judge it. You can come back next week, they play the San Francisco 49ers, and then they shut down the 49ers, and let's say it's Jimmy Garoppolo's first start. I'm also not going to judge them and say, oh, actually they are good. It's all about the matchups. So 3 weeks, Philadelphia Eagles, Carson Wentz. Okay, that's a good quarterback with the lesser, I feel like, weapons maybe than they don't have a Julio Jones, but they do have a Zach Ertz or something like that. And there's certain situations. Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, now we're talking about Blake Bortles, and then then Jared Goff, and then Dak Prescott, and then maybe Drew Stanton at the end. There's just another whole situation, and so it's not going to be based on this one game. We're going to get clues, but those clues will not give us many answers from how do you play the Falcons versus how do you play the 49ers. They're totally different situations. And that's how much time I'll dedicate to every single simple question. Does the Delano Hill era begin or what? Well, no, it's going to be, Bradley McDougald. And if Delano Hill does come in, I hope it's because he's a good player and that he needs to get in there. But We don't need to rush into anything. Okay. I mean, that's not the type of guy I am. I don't rush into things. So if you like me, woo me a little bit. And I don't know nothing about Delano at this point because he hasn't really been out there very much. So let's get into that wooing phase, and it won't take much to woo me if you're a Delano Hill, because I love a good rookie situation, and that comes from at Venice Beach Zach. Venice Beach is in LA where I live. At Shifty Quail or Shifty Qual. I's and L's, get your shit together, because sometimes I can't tell the difference. A lot has been made about how Sark has fared as the OC compared to Shanahan. What's the biggest difference you see? Oh man, I would definitely direct this to a Falcons writer, the falcoholic.com. That's where we had some technical difficulties. And I would love to get some more in there. But we've got something coming up on field goals with our 5 questions for the Falcoholic, which is coming up on, I don't know, Sunday or Monday before the game. And we get into talking about Sark. And I can tell you that I think that the Sark stuff is not, they don't love it. And but they're hopeful, and they, in the sense of, like, I think what I've gathered from what Dave Choate of the Falcoholic has gathered from the fan base, which is, they wanted him fired at a certain point for sure. And I think there was never a ton of hope, but it's just about, is he utilizing his weapons in the best ways possible? And maybe they were starting to do that last week against the Dallas Cowboys. Will that continue this week for them against the Seattle Seahawks? Or was that just a situation where they're going up against, a pretty not that great defense with the Cowboys, a bad defense with the Cowboys? And we don't know if the Seahawks defense is going to be bad now without Sherman and Chancellor, because it wasn't good. It was pretty bad without Earl Thomas last year. So I'm open to the possibilities. What role is Maxwell going to play Monday? Says, I am Nate Hull. I'm not sure. I'm not sure anyone is sure. And, it's a quick situation for them to have to catch up into. And this falls into etc. But what do you think of grape nuts? Says Mike Industries. I think I think we can all agree that grape nuts are, God's great joke. They're God's greatest joke, that he just laid this in front of people and said, yeah, you should eat this. And it's a disaster on many levels. I can remember as a kid having grape nuts in the house and just being like, well, why? What else could we have used this area for? I don't care if it's 1 foot by 2 inches of area, with a nice height of another, a foot. It's what are you doing? So for me to enjoy this, I have to, like, put a bunch of shit in it. Like, why not just give me something where no shit is needed to be added? It's like you don't buy a TV and they say, well, this is a TV, but in order to watch it, you also have to buy this screen. So stop making me, stop giving me grape nuts and telling me there's grapes in it or nuts. It's just like cat food. So nobody likes that. Moving on, and we'll get back to questions here, but I gotta speed it up at some point. The Atlanta Falcons are 5-4. So just the thing about them is, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They lost 28-3. That's what I believe the score is now. That's what for the rest of the time, the score of that Super Bowl will be 28-3. But the Falcons had a historic offense last year, and then Kyle Shanahan, of course, as aforementioned, went to San Francisco, isn't putting up historic numbers with the 49ers, I can tell you that much. But the Falcons offense is 10th in DVOA, so as much complaints as there are about Sark, I don't know that if Shanahan had stayed, they would be that much better than 10th in offensive DVOA. And that's just expected regression. That's just expected other teams catching up to what they were able to do. And I don't think that there is that much shame in being 10th in offensive DVOA. The Seahawks are 14th in offensive DVOA, and Russell Wilson is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So, what's going on there? They didn't have as many excuses. I feel like they're going with the same offensive coordinator now for the 7th year in a row or whatever. So there's less to be, I think, worried about offensively for the Atlanta Falcons, but their defense on DVOA is 24th, and that's just a little bit more shocking to me. I mean, I think they're improving defensively, and they're 10th in yards allowed, 10th in points allowed, and 7th in yards allowed, and 4th in net yards per pass attempt allowed. They held the Cowboys to 7 points last week when the Cowboys didn't have Ezekiel Elliott, but I think overall their defense to be 24th in DVOA is a little bit surprising because I love Deion Jones as a linebacker. I love Keanu Neal as a safety. I love Devondre Campbell as a linebacker. I love Desmond Trufant as a cornerback. Adrian Claiborne, a defensive end who just had a 6-sack game, which sort of, mystifies his numbers a little bit and makes it a little unfair to say that he has 8 sacks and to think that that's the type of, pass rusher he is. But still, the type of pass rusher that can get 6 sacks against a bad left tackle, which is something definitely the Seahawks can take note of, as they may be going to this game with Matt Tobin. And then Vic Beasley, I think is a great pass rusher himself, and still working out some things as they sort of have been experimenting more with him at linebacker. I think Dontari Poe is a very good defensive tackle. And Tack McKinley, their first-round pick at defensive end, he's got 2 sacks in limited action. I think he's a pretty good player. They also have, just some other decent players. But overall, the talent, I feel like, should be much better than 24th. So there's certainly some concerns there for their end. And on the other end, for Russell Wilson to be at home on Monday night, facing off against a defense that is 24th in DVOA. Maybe there is hope there for Russell Wilson to put up 3 to 4 to 5 touchdowns. And, I can cap those expectations at maybe 3 touchdowns and be happy. But I'm just saying Russell Wilson on Monday night is 6-0. Him in prime time is like 17-3 or something. His Monday Night Football, he has 12 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he plays very well, and he plays very well at home. Obviously, he's one of the best home quarterbacks in NFL history up to this point. And so there's a lot of things I think stacked in Seattle's favor in terms of the matchup and in terms of Russell Wilson's ability to pad some of those stats for the MVP conversations that'll be had in the next 2 months. But overall, I think it's interesting that their defense is ranking in the bottom third, because I thought it would be a little bit better than that, even though I also thought their offense, it almost is where I would have expected it to be, 10th in DVOA. Maybe I would have thought maybe more in the 5 to 7 range. But really, a lot of it just comes down to the fact that this year Matt Ryan is Matt Ryan. He's not the Matt Ryan that won the MVP last year and had a passer rating of 117.1. He's the Matt Ryan that has a passer rating of 93.9 this year. Guess what his career passer rating is? 93.6. He averages 263.6 yards per game this season. Guess what his career average is? 265.4. Every number almost perfectly lines up this season with his career numbers. So I think that we're seeing the Matt Ryan that we're used to seeing. We're seeing the Atlanta offense that we're used to seeing, except for one major change, which is going to be no Devontae Freeman. Freeman, of course, or maybe not, of course, you may not have heard the news. His concussion is going to take him out of this game, and they're going to go with Tevin Coleman. Now, Tevin Coleman is a very good running back in his own right, but he's not Devontae Freeman, and there's a reason that Freeman is the lead back. Coleman last week had 20 carries for 83 yards and a touchdown because he's a pretty good back, and he does against Dallas. This is a better run defense than the Dallas Cowboys have, even without Jarran Reed. But if Jarran Reed's there, it's an even higher dimension for them. And so, they're not going to have Freeman, and that's going to change things up. And we may see Taron Ward a little bit. He's only got 9 carries on the season. Not that the Seahawks can brag about their rushing game, of course. Russell Wilson still leads the team in rushing yards, and that is 100% not changing this week, as he has a 165-yard lead on Thomas Rawls and a 162-yard lead on Eddie Lacy. So not probably going to change this week in terms of who the leading rusher is. And that'll probably, continue for a little while, if not through the end of the season. So not a lot of, things to be hopeful for, even though the Atlanta Falcons run defense is really bad. So their run defense for the Atlanta Falcons are 24th overall. They're 20th against the pass, and they're 28th against the run in DVOA. So it's an opportunity for the Seahawks to run the ball, and Pete Carroll has much said that Eddie Lacy will be getting plenty of opportunities. and just try and take some deep breaths when you hear stuff like that. But in terms of being unhopeful for the Seattle Seahawks because of the injuries to Sherman and Chancellor, I mean, on one hand, I can't really tell you that things are going to be okay because this is new territory would not have Richard Sherman. And it only exacerbates the issue to not have, Cam Chancellor. On the other hand, what players did they not have that they could have? Deshaun Shedd could return, in December. Malik McDowell could return in December. Chris Carson could return in December. CJ Prosise could return in January if they make it to the playoffs. There are other situations as well, like, the fact that Freeney and Jordan are contributing for the first time. Maxwell's back. There are certain other changes that could make them slightly better. We could also see the return of Jokel. Of course, he's going to return, and Dwayne Brown could be, if he stays on that left side for the whole rest of the year. And how much the offensive line will mature and get better and gel if they're given the opportunity to play together for not just the next, 7 games of the regular season, but a couple playoff games. Who knows? There's going to be the opportunity for the offensive line to get better. Russell Wilson's in the middle of his best season statistically through 9 games ever. And he could finish with 40 touchdowns. He could finish with, leading the league in passing yards, which is crazy, but it's true. And, he's still going to have maybe, he had his fourth quarter comeback of the season against Washington. The defense just didn't hold it. So, we're used to seeing that against maybe these Atlanta Falcons. So I think there's plenty to hold your hat on in terms of being hopeful. The Seahawks are a good team, and they continue to be a good team. They're just one that lost one of their absolute best players. How devastating that is, we'll find out. I was about to say devastential, and I think that's fine to call that a word. At Chazzy P4 says, is this the week the run game finally gets going? Atlanta Rundy, not great. Well, I just went over that. And I think that it's not really going to be a situation where it'll be interesting to see a really bad run defense if they can play really bad against a really bad rushing offense. It's not necessarily like, because just in the same sense, I mean, you could just as easily flip it sounds simple. Bad run defense should give up lots of yards, but it's not that simple. The Seahawks are 22nd in rushing on DVOA, and they're even worse on every other stat. So it's not that simple, because just as much as you're saying, well, maybe the Seahawks will finally be able to run this week, the Falcons fans are saying, well, maybe finally the Falcons will be able to stop somebody. So it's not really going to be that simple. They have to block first. They have to break a tackle first, and that's not something that's happened consistently this season, or barely at all this season. So no, I don't know if this is going to be the week that the run offense finally gets going. They need to actually just go out there and do it. If they can start doing that consistently, the Seahawks absolutely will make the playoffs. If they can start running the ball 150 yards, 200 yards, 355, 400 yards a game. If they can start running for 400 yards a game, I think the Seahawks will win at least half of their games and potentially a playoff game. At Banco Swine says, how, if at all, do you expect the Falcons' offensive approach to change now, given the injuries in the secondary? I don't know how much it changes, but I think obviously you're going to go to it just changes everything dynamically between the difference of Julio Jones versus Richard Sherman to Julio Jones versus Shaquille Griffin or whoever. It doesn't mean that they're going to just it always seems so easy, right, to exploit an injury. And then every single time the game comes out, that injury is not quite as exploited as you thought it would be, or isn't at all. Remember how the Washington offensive line was supposed to be all backups or third stringers, and the Seahawks didn't create pressure on Kirk Cousins. So I don't feel that positively one way or another when these things happen. If anything, there's just so much that goes into every NFL game that it's hard to just quickly adjust to these changes, even with a week of lead up time or a week and a half. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think if it changes at all, it's not so much the loss of Richard Sherman so much as it is the loss of Devontae Freeman for them. So the Atlanta Falcons, if anything, will they throw the ball to Julio Jones more? Possibly, probably. But they already throw it to him a ton. So it's more or less more so. It's less more so, or it's more or less so about Julio Jones maybe than it would be about Taylor Gabriel, who's, a player. The other players, can they get them involved? Especially as the Seahawks might have to add more attention towards one side of the field without having that single guy that can shut it down. And I'll take maybe just one more question here from at Zolske. Do you see the Hawks taking more chances with the blitz and attempt to create more turnovers in the secondary? Well, I think that, like I said, they need to create more pressure. So that's the situation. And if that's going to come through the blitz, then so be it. But without more than anything, I just want them to create pressure rushing 4. Other teams create pressure on the Seahawks rushing 1. So if the Seahawks can just rush 4, especially you look at their alignment and you just look at what they have, you just want to say, hey, you've got Michael Bennett and Frank Clark and Sheldon Richardson and Naz Jones and Dwight Freeney and Deion Jordan and maybe Jaron Reed and Marcus Smith. Create pressure. Michael Bennett, perennial Pro Bowler. Frank Clark, one of the best under 25 players in the NFL. Sheldon Richardson, former All-Pro. He was like 26 years old. Dwight Freeney, he's gotten the job done. He's 37 or whatever, and he's doing it. Deion Jordan didn't play for 3 years. He did it in his first game back, and I don't know how consistent that's going to be. If you've got a defensive line like this, I don't know what you have to do. I don't know why you have to create a bunch of crazy formations or blitzes or packages or whatever. Maybe, sure, do it. If you're Chris Richard, do it. Do something. You drop game plans and stuff. But you're paying for talent. You gave up second-round pick for Sheldon Richardson. You're paying him, whatever is $9 million. You spent a second-round pick on Frank Clark. You gave Michael Bennett, a contract extension to keep him around, and you pay him, $10 million or whatever it is. You've spent a third-round pick on Nazir Jones. You've got these guys. You spent a second-round pick on Jaron Reed. Create more pressure. The Seahawks 20th or so in the NFL in creating pressure. You should be top 10, top 5. This is a front 7 with Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright that I fully expected to be one of the top 5 front 7s in the NFL, and I can't say that they are. And it doesn't matter if Cliff Avrill's, been out after 4 games. It does matter, but that's not enough of an excuse to say, well, we really hinge everything on Cliff Avril. And it wasn't even like it was great with Cliff Avril. So with hopefully, the additions of Freeney and Jordan, if they can continue to play like they did, and if Jaron Reed can be healthy, and if they can get more consistent work out of, Frank Clark, I think that this should still be one of the top 5 front 7s and, defensive lines in the NFL, and it hasn't been. So that's something that I really think matters more so than any packages. These guys are supposed to be talent always trumps. So that's what I want to see more of, is that the talent is working out. And so it looks like for now, Luke Joeckel has officially been ruled out for the game. So without Luke Joeckel in the game, and Dwayne Brown and Jaron Reed are questionable. So without Luke Joeckel, it's definitely going to be another week of Ethan Posick at left guard, and that's been a struggle at times. So without Joeckel and, obviously him being behind a little bit in the progress, it's a situation. But still, if they can get Dwayne Brown, that'll be even bigger and more hopeful. So that's the situation there. Seahawks-Falcons, Monday Night Football at 5:30 in Seattle, ESPN. I got to plug ESPN in case you don't know about it. Cut the cord? I don't think so, guys. Get more cords. And that's the game situation. I think the Seahawks are going to win because I never bet against Russell Wilson on Monday Night Football at home, and I'm going to continue to do that until it doesn't work. So I think the Seahawks win this game in the 28-24 type range, and that's what I'll stick with for now. This has been Seahawks Chats with Kenneth Arthur